Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week. We have record highs in a lot of markets across the board. Dangers from a report out of Japan from receiving blood from people that have gotten the thing in their arm. And a lot more news from the interest rate front as well. Let's go ahead and get started. The Fed this week decided to leave rates unchanged on Wednesday. That absolutely sent most markets absolutely flying. The stocks in the United States, the S&P 500, the Dow, and the NASDAQ all hit record highs. Powell, which is the chairman, let's say the guy in charge or, the head guy basically in the central bank, said that the high inflation hadn't changed the underlying story of the slowing, easing price pressures, but that the U.S. is still on track to have 3 interest rate cuts this year. So due to the fact that they didn't raise interest rates or the speech in regards to that they're still going to lower rates, stocks hit record highs, gold hit a record high, and we even have a big bank like Standard Chartered changing their expectation of where Bitcoin is going to be at the end of the year as well. All the markets in the U.S. mostly positive this week. Canada was also positive at 0.49%. I'm just going to write something down here real quick. And then in some of the conspiracy theory news, a report out of of Japan is saying that receiving a blood transfusion from people that have gotten the thing in their arm poses a medical risk to people who haven't gotten the thing in their arm. Based on a worldwide study that they did in Japan, there was a lot of numerous adverse events from the people receiving the blood from the people that had the thing in their arm. Obviously, I'm not going to say it because they already banned one of my channels. But you guys know what I'm talking about because, rappers are right. The European markets were mostly higher. Spain was the biggest winner there. Latin America was mostly higher as well. The Merval in Argentina exploded over 14%. Middle East and Africa, mostly mixed. Egypt went down by over 7%, almost 8% actually. It's the biggest market there. And then in the far, far east, Asia, Australia, that whole area, we have the Nikkei, which is the biggest winner there, even though the overall markets were mixed. The Bitcoin and crypto news, Standard Chartered, which is a huge bank based out of London, their head of digital assets named Geoff Kendrick told clients on Monday that he expected the target for Bitcoin at the end of the year to hit 150,000 instead of 100. That would essentially mean that Bitcoin has to double in price from the record of 74,000 that it recently just hit to the end of the year. And Kendrick also said that Bitcoin had a chance to reach 250,000 by the end of 2025. Bitcoin for the week, however, was down 8.51% to 63,675. And in commodities, oil hit a 4-month high on Monday after there were Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian refinery infrastructure. It's reported that they're going to cut, or let's say there was affected about 600,000 barrels of production. That obviously gets heightened the geopolitical risk along the Chinese economic data, which wasn't very good as well. So now we have a situation where oil, where the world economy lives on, is going to continue to go up because of the situation in Ukraine this week. But then we also have China, which is the second largest economy in the world, not having very good economic data. So that would imply that the economy isn't doing as well as what they actually report that it's doing, because obviously it's an election year and they need the economy to look good rather than actually be good so they can get reelected. Crude, the U.S. crude for the week went down 0.50% to 80.63, while Brent, which is the international oil, went up to 85.67. It went up only 0.38%. There's a metal called tantalum, which is a metal. It's an essential component in most cell phones and computers. Mobile computers. I said that backwards. Cell phones and computers, tongue twister. But they're under threat due to the fact that they come out of the Congo, a lot of the mining of this material. But supposedly there's a rebel group called M23, which is supposedly supported by the neighbor of Congo, Rwanda, which is absolutely amazing if you haven't been there. And they're smuggling supposedly this material to other places rather than the city of Goma, where there's blockades. So essentially, this means that if this continues or gets more serious, that the prices of things like cell phones and computers could go up quite a bit. Gold prices hit a record high this week, 2,200 an ounce. People are starting to see the sensitive nature of what the world situation is looking like. This is due to the fact that the Fed maintained the outlook that they're going to have 3 rate cuts per year. We're in a situation where people are starting to notice the precarious situation that the U.S. government is in with its debt. So now people are looking for safe havens like Bitcoin and gold to store their money due to the fact that the dollar doesn't seem to be the best thing to be invested in right now. Gold went up 0.40% for the week, 2,165.50, and silver went down to 2.22% to $24.73. Financial and banking news, the Eurozone inflation increased as expected at 2.6%, and the yen from Japan, the currency from Japan, dropped to a 4-month low against the US dollar. It dipped quite a bit against the euro after they announced that they're going to stop their negative interest rate policy that they've had since 2007, which obviously hasn't worked because the economy hasn't been doing well. If you remember, I think about a month ago or a few weeks ago, I reported that Germany actually overtook Japan as the 3rd largest economy in the world. And that kind of gives you an idea because Japan has a lot more people. There were an economic powerhouse, but obviously they've been quite stagnant the last few years, I should say the last few decades. Political news, Australia is signing a treaty with the World Economic Forum to close all major banks and switch to a fully cashless society. I don't know if you guys remember the Communist Republic of Australia actually was putting people in detention camps during the pandemic. I don't know if you guys saw the videos. They're literally caged in. They're not allowed to leave. That's where we're all headed, it seems like. And Putin, at 71 years of age, won the record post-Soviet landslide in election history. He's now in charge for another 6-year term. And if you guys didn't see what happened this week in regards to the terrorist attack in Moscow, ISIS supposedly took responsibility of the attack. ISIS being the, terrorist rebel group out of the Middle East that, if you don't know, Obama actually helped create. There's actually evidence of that. But now he's saying that he's going to respond with full force. And unfortunately, there was it doesn't matter. I know a lot of people don't like Russia because of the situation in Ukraine, but I don't think innocent people should die anywhere around the world. So unfortunately, there's a lot of people injured and hurt. Colombia is ending its ceasefire with Estado Mayor Central, ECM, which is basically the group that was founded by the people that denied the peace agreement from the FARC, which is a previous big terrorist group in Colombia. An MS-13 leader, one of FBI's most wanted fugitives, was found on the very secure southern border. If you guys are listening on the podcast, it's obviously very sarcastic. And Tyson Foods, which is one of the largest food processors in the world, is firing blue-collar workers and replacing them with illegals. They said that they want to hire another 42,000 migrants if they could find them. And the Communist Republic of California, the University of UC Berkeley, which is one of the most poopy ones, if you guys are listening from overseas, their parents are hiring private security guards to protect their children from the increase in violent crime. And in Texas, they have pulled $8.5 billion from BlackRock over ESG investing. That's the ESG, just to kind of put it in a nutshell. If you don't know, it's basically, close down all oil, invest in renewables, that kind of thing. And it's like Texas has a really big oil economy. They don't want their money to be in a place where they want to basically close down oil, right? Kind of against their interest. And if you guys saw the news, there was a lady in New York that was arrested after she changed the locks on their home due to the fact that squatters were living there, sitting there. Florida, the great Republic of Florida, banned homeless encampments and gives the law power to residents and businesses to sue the city or the governments to allow homeless camps in the city. They basically want to create a program where they provide these people with support and, give them places to stay rather than encroaching on public space like they do in California and San Francisco, where there's, drug needles and food, people excrements on the streets and things like that. In economic news, mortgage payments on a typical home in the last 4 years has almost doubled. Now remember, this is important due to the fact that, almost 70% of the economy in the United States is consumer spending. So if people now are spending double their income, double what they used to pay on their home payment a month, that would essentially mean that they don't have enough money to spend somewhere else. You add on that the situation with inflation, because obviously the inflation is much higher than only 3 or 4% of what they're reporting. That means that consumers are starting to get a little bit tight. And there's even a company called Darden, which is the owner of restaurants like Olive Garden, Longwood Steakhouse, among others. They're even saying that lower income customers are starting to pull back. Remember the news as well that I told you guys, I think it was last quarter. What month are we in? We're in March. I think it was in January, where even companies like Coach, which is, higher end segment in regards to a consumer, they're even starting to pull back because they were changing their expectations of revenue this year. So you can see how things are we're starting to walk a fine line of where the economy is headed, especially since almost 70% of the economy, which is consumer spending, is starting to wobble a little bit. Number of Americans filing new claims of unemployment unexpectedly fell last week. This is one of the numbers that the Central Bank of the United States looks at to see the state of the economy. So essentially the thinking here is that, well, if the unemployment is going down, that would imply that the economy is doing well. So maybe we won't drop the interest rates as fast, even though dropping the interest rates does get the economy moving, because obviously that would allow the consumer to go out and spend more money. Sales of previously owned homes increased by most in a year. In February, there was a sign the economy is still holding its footing. A National Association of Realtors said existing home sales jumped 9.5% last month, highest level since February 2003. And in corporate news, X, previously known as Twitter, has now received a money transmitter license for payment services in 22 U.S. states. Alphabet, which is the owner of Google, went up by over 4% after Apple was discussing licensing the artificial intelligence from Google called Gemini to power the iPhone, or put it in the iPhone. And Tesla is planning to increase their Model Y price by $1,000 beginning in April. Their stock went up by over 6% on the news, but their stock is down this year by over 30%. NVIDIA, the corporate darling, since the AI revolution has come about, they went up quite a bit. Looking at the numbers here, over 1% after they rolled out their first iteration of AI graphics processors known as Blackwell. And Apple went down 4% after they reported that after it was reported that the DOJ, the Department of Justice in the United States, is planning on suing them for anti-competitive practices. Shares are down 11% in 2004, but just under 7% year over year. And Elon Musk is announcing that Neuralink's next project, called Blindside, is a device to recover the sight of people to restore vision. They've already reported there was a guy who was paraplegic, and I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying. He was able to post on Twitter using the Neuralink in his brain, even though he wasn't using his arms, which I thought was pretty interesting. And international news, Taiwan's foreign minister says that China has built enormous military bases on 3 islands surrounding Taiwan. They both lay claim to the area around the South China Sea, so that's probably going to escalate quite a bit soon. And ISIS, as I mentioned, claiming responsibility for the Moscow concert attack. At least 40 people were killed, over 100 civilians injured, and they caught some of the terrorists that did it. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, preppers were right.